I think of the soundtrack of daily life, I imagine more than songs. I imagine the freedom to choose what I hear and when I hear it. That idea, so natural today, was not obvious before 1979. Until then, music belonged to shared spaces, living rooms, cars, radios, and record players. Then Sony released a small cassette player called the Walkman, and suddenly music became private, portable, and deeply personal. The Walkman did not just change technology, it changed culture, reshaping how people moved, worked, and dreamed. The story begins in Japan in the late 1970s. Sony was already a global innovator in consumer electronics, but its leaders wanted to create something new. Masaru Ibuka, one of the co-founders, longed for a device that would let him enjoy music during flights without disturbing others. Engineers adapted a small recorder, removed the recording function, added lightweight stereo headphones, and created a blue and silver box called the TPSL2. It was sleek, light, and came with a hotline button that allowed two people to listen together. On July 1st, 1979, the Walkman was launched in Tokyo. At first, critics dismissed it. Who would buy a cassette player that could not record? But young people understood instantly. The Walkman was not about utility, it was about identity. It turned music into a companion, available anywhere. On crowded trains, in busy streets, in quiet parks, listeners carried private worlds of sound. For the first time, you could choose the soundtrack of your own life. Sales soared. Within months, hundreds of thousands of units were sold in Japan. Soon it reached Europe and the United States. Advertisements showed stylish young people jogging, biking, and strolling with bright orange headphones. The message was simple: owning a Walkman meant freedom. By the mid-1980s, tens of millions had been sold, and the name Walkman became generic worldwide. The cultural shift was dramatic. Before the Walkman, music was usually shared. Families around radios, friends spinning records together. With the Walkman, listening became solitary and intimate. Some feared it would isolate people, turning streets into corridors of silence. Others saw liberation, the right to design personal soundscapes. Sociologists observed how city life was transformed as individuals claimed control over their environments with nothing but headphones. The Walkman also shaped behavior. Orange foam headphones became a fashion statement. Carrying cassettes was like carrying identity cards. The jogging boom of the 80s was fueled by portable music. The device gave birth to the mixtape culture. Compiling songs onto a cassette for yourself or for a friend became an art form, a coded language of love, rebellion, or belonging. The Walkman was not just hardware, it was social software. Teenagers embraced it fiercely. For many, their Walkman was their most intimate possession, filled with cassettes that defined who they were: rock, disco, punk, hip-hop, or classical. Each tape was a badge of identity. The Walkman democratized music. It allowed everyone to carry their culture, not just the privileged with access to stereos and cars. Sony innovated continuously. Smaller, lighter models appeared. Waterproof Walkmans promised music by the pool. Some versions added radios. The Walkman 2 in 1983 became slimmer and even more successful. By the end of the decade, more than 50 million units had been sold. By 1995, sales exceeded 150 million. The word Walkman joined the global vocabulary. The impact reached the music industry. Record companies saw cassette sales explode. Artists began designing albums for headphones, knowing fans would experience them privately. Cassette singles became popular, cheap gateways to new music. The Walkman encouraged personalization, shaping how labels marketed artists and how fans consumed them. The Walkman also played a role in subcultures. In New York, underground hip-hop spread through cassettes, swapped hand to hand. The device became a tool for rebellion, for creativity, for spreading new sounds. Breakdancers rehearsed routines to Walkman beats. Punk fans carried tapes that screamed independence. Portable music became a weapon of culture. Yet controversy followed. Teachers complained that students hid behind headphones. Safety officials worried about accidents among bikers and joggers. Critics argued it symbolized selfishness, turning public life into isolated bubbles. But even those criticisms proved its impact. The Walkman had become part of global consciousness. In the 1990s, technology advanced. Sony introduced the Discman, a CD version of the Walkman. Mini-disc models followed, promising higher quality in smaller formats. But change was coming. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod, capable of storing thousands of songs. The iPod and later smartphones carried forward the Walkman's dream, but with digital power. Gradually, the cassette Walkman faded. By the time Sony discontinued it in 2010, more than 200 million cassette Walkmans had been sold. The device had become nostalgia, remembered by those who grew up in the 80s and 90s. Collectors treasure vintage models. Movies and shows use them as symbols of an era when portable music was still miraculous. The legacy remains. Every playlist, every pair of earbuds, every jogger listening on the move owes something to that invention. The Walkman taught us to expect music to be portable, personal, and private. Without it, the iPod might never have existed. Without it, the smartphone might not double as a jukebox. The Walkman gave us the habit of carrying our soundtracks everywhere. Looking ahead, the Walkman reminds us that technology is not just machinery. It is culture. It is identity. It is the rewriting of daily rituals. The Walkman created new rhythms of life, walking with beats, exercising with motivation, traveling with escape. It taught us that machines can create intimacy, not just convenience. When I think of the Walkman, I think of more than cassette tapes and orange headphones. I think of freedom, of movement, of teenagers walking home with songs in their ears, of joggers pounding sidewalks with beats in step, of commuters transformed into dreamers by the press of a button. The Walkman was not just a device. It was a revolution in how we listen, and its echoes continue every time someone presses play today.